And now we're going to switch back to that halftone brush, make it a little bit cooler with a cadmium green. We're going to continue to sculpt around the mouth. Very subtle drop in value there. And the value range is much more compressed in the lights. And I think I remember this photograph was taken under natural light. So like a window light. So when you're working from a natural light source, or even like in this case a photograph of someone under natural light, the value range will be a little bit more compressed. And that's okay. And the way to compress those values, what we're doing here, just bouncing back and forth between the values, relating them to one another and painting them as close to one another as we can, while still maintaining their subtle differentiation. And this is getting darker because the face, you know, the mouth is really, I don't know if this is true, but the mouth almost feels like the face is turning into itself, which is kind of a weird way to think about it, but that's why we're getting a darker tone around the corner of the accent of the mouth, because the face is like basically turning inwards. It's a very peculiar thing. And the trick is to know how much information is enough information for me to work with. I don't want to put too much down. I don't want to perfectly render anything. So if need be, if I need to move things around, I want to be able to move things around. And I really do hope that this longer format is helping you out. I kind of was playing around with this idea in my head of like calling this Operation Brushstroke, but then I realized like that might sound too serious or like too like, I don't know, too tactical. But anyway, this is like, in my head, this is like Operation Brushstroke, because I'm showing you every single brushstroke. Which is something I've never done for a painting like this. In the past, you used to only get like like 1 hour, 2 hours at the most a week of a portrait painting tutorial, and who knows how long this one's going to take. So I hope that this longer daily format is helping you out. So again, a lot of value compression around here. That's why I'm using the synthetic right now. And the addition of a new shape can also put the previous shapes into another kind of window of observation. So now that we put this mouth down, even though the mouth is probably not in the right spot or anything like that, now we'll have room to relate all of these shapes to. I think I want the lip to be a little bit lighter, and maybe I do need to make that bottom lip a little bit smaller. So let's see here. Let's get that halftone brush out. And move this shape up. And see that? Like I said, keep your shapes simple and easy. And while we're doing that, let's get the light brush and start to push a little bit more warmth into the lips. Just mixing right into this area of the palette. So I like to mix colors right onto one another on the palette just to help to cut back on the saturation. So obviously some of the cadmium green that was up here before is going to interact with the red. And don't be afraid to mix complementary colors. I think complementary colors tend to give really nice flesh tones. So a little bit more pink there. And then as I put that there, I'm now starting to see that the nasal bone is actually kind of sticking out a little bit more. So with the same color family, just a little bit more orangey. So we're going to add a little bit more of the cadmium yellow deep. And again, that's a Grumbacher color. I really like this color. And no one's paying me to tell you what colors or brands I like. I'm telling you that Grumbacher has a really nice cadmium yellow deep color. Okay, I think a little warmer. Okay, so now I think that the nasal bone should stick out a little bit more, but again, this is going to be very subtle. So let's get you in close-up shot here. And this is the area in question, so let's see what this does. It's super subtle. It's a very, very subtle change. And I think it's also, there's some influence of that shape up here. And I think that now that I have you in close-up, I think that we need to address that again. So with the burnt umber, the little drawing color that we had before, you know, when we drew out this little shape here. So let's go ahead, push this inwards very slightly. And now here's a little drawing technique that I use. So I'm going to drop a vertical. Let's see. Honestly, it's very hard for me because I don't have the photo reference next to me like you're seeing there. I have to I'm using a TV screen that's pretty far away from you off to the side. So let's see here. So I like to use a vertical just to kind of relate contours. I think that is up. Something's up with this. From that to that. I think it could just be that I need to push this shape further back a little more. I think. And then that goes back further. And I'm going to relate the nostril. So let's get a little dark shape for the nostril. So with Alizarin permanent ivory black. So let's just get a simple accent for the nostril. There we go. A simple shape for the nostril. It might be too dark. So let's just alter it a little bit. We're also seeing a little bit of the bottom of the other nostril over here, and just a little touch for that. Don't need much, however. So now I'm going to relate, I'm going to drop a vertical from the mouth, or sorry, the chin to the nostril. And I think that this shape can maybe move forward. So first, let's get the halftone brush. Yes, hopefully that's the halftone brush. So let's get the halftone brush. Just adjust this edge a little bit lighter. Very carefully now, we're just going to adjust that edge. So I'm going to go ahead and put these light values back in, even if I have to move the mouth around, just to give me a little bit of I don't know, I think it helps me see when I have more values. When you have more values, it can complicate things a little bit, but I think it just helps you see a little better. So I'm just trying to put in more information here in the hopes that I will see what to do with that. So now the middle tone brush. And like I said, I'm just introducing a few more values. You know, this form is getting lighter because the plane is, of course, facing the light a little bit more. Hopefully that will help me see this. But again, I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be a perfect photographic rendition of the model. So I think that I may be dwelling in this a little bit too much. So let me get the halftone brush and let's just continue to, I mixed them up. That was the light brush. This is the halftone brush, make it a little cooler. Maybe this value. So I would consider this kind of the noodling. So noodling is kind of a term that I heard back when I was at Studio Incominati in Philadelphia. So noodling is kind of, it's a natural thing, it'll happen, but is when you paint over a particular area over and over and over again. It's kind of when you're going in circles, but sometimes you have to go in circles to figure out where to move next. And don't feel like every step of the painting has to yield the final result in that particular area of the painting. Sometimes it's okay to just experiment too. So now let's switch to the dark brush. Let's just start to create this gradation here. Let's start with the ramus of the jaw, little corner here. Starting from out here. And I'm going to work between the halftone brush and the, the halftone brush and the dark brush. The halftone brush and the brush. That's what we're going to use. And the reason I'm going over, you know, each little brush stroke like 1,000 times is just because I'm trying to get a very, very soft edge here. And I'm going to be going back and forth between the shadow brush. I'm going to just make that a little warmer. I'm going to be going back and forth between the shadow brush and the halftone brush to get this edge for the mandible. So on a practical level, the mandible right here and the top of the forehead, so on a practical level, they're probably the easiest things to move either, you know, up or down. Like if I'm showing too much of her forehead, which I probably am, I can easily just go in like this and soften an edge and bring that shape down a little bit. Like I said, keep your shape simple and easy. And this area is usually a little cooler, a little bit less bright. And that's just because as you approach the lighter planes, like these areas that are facing the light more, the planes will get a little bit more color. You'll see a little bit more color to them. But as you move away, in particular in the shadow, you'll see less color. But of course, there's still color in the shadow, it's just not as bright. Depending on the lighting situation, of course. Now let's get that other brush, so the shadow brush. So we're using the shadow brush and the whatchamacallit brush. So I like to relate the corner of the mouth. I think I need a little bit more of a shape for that. I like to relate the corner of the mouth to the neck. So drawing a line from here to here is usually very useful for me. So I guess the neck is going to go around here. There's also going to be a lot of warmth, so let's do that. So the cadmium red, the yellow ochre, cadmium red and cadmium yellow deep. So this is Gamblin's cadmium red medium and Grumbacher's cadmium yellow deep. There we go. And it's going to get even darker as it approaches back there in the photo reference, but and in nature as well, just because, like I said, when you're facing the light a little bit less, it's going to get darker. So definitely back here, we're facing the light much less. And then of course we're going to start to approach the dark values for the hair. I'm still going to keep working on this edge. It's a very particular edge, very peculiar edge to try to work out. So now, I think now we can start to put in some darker tones around the back here. So we're going to slowly move our way towards the dark values for the hair. Starting with that. We want this edge to be really, really soft. And then we're going to switch to the halftone brush, which I've been calling the whatchamacallit brush. So right into here. Just going to give a little bit more structure. We're going to put even more nuance into this gradation of tone. And I don't know if it's the case, but it seems like, it's very hard for me to notice it right now, but it seems like the chin may be too far down. And if it is, it probably isn't by that much. So let's use the middle tone brush. So we're going to get a very clean edge, and I'm kind of mixing right onto the painting just to get this edge. A little bit warmer. So I'm going to go for this halftone first, because we're going to be making a drawing correction. We're going to be moving this up. But like I said, the forehead and the mandible are like the easiest shapes to move up. So then why do I struggle with the mandible so much? Not entirely sure, but anyway, let's go and add some more of that color that we had before. And I'm not measuring anything. These proportions that you're seeing me paint in are basically being deduced by eye. And again, I like to change things around. So recently I'm not doing any measuring. I mean, I'm using like verticals and horizontals and things like that, but not physically going out and measuring anything. So I think that ought to be about good for moving that shape up. Now what we have to do is we have to be a little brave, so let's do this. With the dark brush, we're going to add more Neo Megilp medium to it. And we're going to mix up a very dark value. Knowingly, I'm mixing right onto a previous puddle just to ensure that I don't get a value that's too dark. And now we're going to use this to put in the basically this little contour. So let's start to gradually work our way up. So now that I have that, you know, the halftone brush, the whatchamacallit brush, I'm going to have to use in the shadow just to put in a little bit more of that reflected light. And it's going to be a little bit warmer. So I'm going to add a little more of that cadmium red and yellow ochre, I keep mixing them up. Cadmium red medium and cadmium yellow deep. Something about like that. I'm very careful though. I don't want anything in the shadow to be as light as anything basically in the light. Is that enough, or can I push it further? Let's push it even more. Let's push the light. So cadmium red medium, and maybe, just maybe that. Let's see. All right, I think that's okay. So let's put the dark shape in now, starting with this corner. I'm actually going to take some of the paint off using the paper towel. Let's get you in close-up for this. All right, so now you're in close-up, and I'm going to look at this angle very carefully. I think rather than that, I think instead of like this, it's more like that. So let's go ahead and make these adjustments. And I want that edge to be really soft. It doesn't have to be super soft. It doesn't have to be as soft as the hairline, but fairly soft. And try not to leave too many, like super sharp chops. Rather, like in here, I'm going to leave a little bit of a curve. just adds a little more grace to the shapes. And certainly you can see it on our model. You know, this isn't a straight chop. It's not like the top of a triangle. Rather, it's a little bit more of a graceful little curve there. And in this way, and in the same way, I'll be able to push the chin up if I need to. Which I think I needed to. Just that slight little push. And I think we're going to revisit this dark after we get this shape in. So with the halftone brush, the whatchamacallit brush, I'm going to put in some of the cadmium green. And right into this little area of the value family, I'm going to want to now revisit that shape. And in terms of not necessarily the shape, but the value. So I think that the value was probably too dark. And again, I don't think that that's actually a shadow. I don't know, but I don't have the live model in front of me, so it's kind of hard to know whether or not this surface is in the light or not. In the future, one of my dreams in the future is to be able to, you know, continue creating these daily painting videos for you, but I want to have live models there. It's one of my dreams. I like painting from pictures as well, but you know, you can have a live model there in front of you and you can just get up close and see if this is in shadow or not. I think that that would be so excellent. Let's just go ahead and throw in this little highlight here. Very subtle. And I think there's much more light than I was describing before over here. But I have to be careful with the camera. I did take this picture with an iPhone 6, so I think the exposure is probably kind of high. So in life, there wouldn't be that high of an exposure, at least, you know, us observing the model. Oh, okay, so now that we're here, there's more structure that I kind of forgot to put on the forehead, so right over here. So the superciliary is going to be a little bit of a highlight here. And then let's make it a little more yellow. So the cadmium yellow deep, titanium white. Let's throw in a little bit of Alizarin crimson permanent, but just a tiny bit, just to tint it away from the orangey and to actually cool it down a little bit. See that? And then of course we're going to use the value scale on our palette to describe this curve. So the curvature of the form with much more specificity now. Gonna soften this edge a little bit more too. So in the same way, I'm going to continue to soften edges and adjust colors. So now that we have pretty much all of the information we want into here, we're going to start to knit them closer to one another. A little bit lighter. And I think that plane right there is starting to bother me. So I'm going to take some of the paint off, just using the dry paper towel, and let's just see if we can get the value we want just by kind of lightly tapping onto the surface. Very subtle stuff now. And so in the same way, I'm going to lighten this. I want this edge to be very subtle now. Just put in some more warmth. And I think all into here as well, I want to push some more color variation. So we're going to put in some cadmium red medium, alizarin permanent, right into this area of the palette, because this is the relative value that I want, but you know, that's going to be way too red. So let's lighten the value. You know, I only want to lighten the value very slightly, but I also want to add more pigment. So what do you think I'm going to use? If your guess is Flake white, you are correct. Alright, so let's see if we can use this to add a little bit more warmth into this area. Very subtle now. Almost imperceptible. So now we're going to cool it down a little bit, maintaining the same kind of value family, but maybe just a little bit lighter. And now we're going to revisit this plane. I'm going to soften that edge just a little bit. So let's just get a little bit of a darker color on this little brush. And there's a little more of a dark shape here. I guess it's the lower eyelids. Or sorry, it's the lower eyelash.